With September being Suicide Prevention Month, I thought it would be meaningful if I took a few minutes and talked with you about suicide. I know this is a biggie. This is a very sensitive subject matter for many of us, myself included. But it is a subject that I hold near and dear to my heart for obvious reasons. For those of you who have followed me, you know that I both personally have experienced suicide in my family, but professionally, I work with it, unfortunately, too often. And so, having said that, I definitely have a lot of experience around suicide, and I also have a unique spiritual perspective. And I do feel that it's partly my responsibility in having that to share it with all of you who are seeking insight and a broader, more spiritual perspective on it. And so just know I can only speak from my experience. And I'm sharing this with you, and I ask you to take it in and then gut check it. You know, really go within and gut check it against your own inner knowing, your own intuitive guidance, and then form your own conclusion around it. Please know, my intention in sharing this is to offer you that insight, to offer you comfort and hope in the knowing that your loved ones, however they died, but especially when they've died by suicide, are in a good place in the afterlife, and they are still very much with you. So I want to start just by sharing with you that I was on the other side of the table recently, and that I did a virtual large audience event with the amazing psychic medium John Edward. John was one of my indirect teachers back in the day, 20 some years ago, when he was one of the first brave souls out there, pioneer in our field doing this work, and he had that show Crossing Over. And I would watch him and gain confidence and understanding of how to take my own mediumship gifts and then use them for good. And so I did this large event, just watching it to get a better understanding of how I too can offer the same events, which is coming in the near future. And so I got read. I never get read. And I know why I got read. So my father, it started with my grandmother, my grandma Babe, who died by suicide and who is partly responsible for helping get me on my path in doing this work. And she came forward with my dad. And John said that they were really adamant on me understanding the bigger reason why I am doing this work. And a lot of it had to do with the family legacy of suicide and changing the stigma around suicide in general. And I knew he was right because I've always felt passionate about that. I do feel part of my work is to normalize the paranormal and to demystify all of the judgment and the negative lens through which so many people see suicide. And so he said it's very important that I change the language around suicide, and that, for example, use the word died by suicide, died by versus committed. Okay, there is a big difference. And so, he said in doing that, you're creating this balance for these spirits. And that right there felt really, really empowering and good. And so, again, another reason why I feel like it's my job to share this with you. And so he then went on to talk about how my dad was bipolar, suffered from depression for many years, and it's a slippery slope. And he asked me, did your dad self-medicate? Well, for 11 years, he didn't. He was on the meds he needed. He was balanced. He was in an amazing place until he got to this point where he started self-medicating. And my understanding, if I recall correctly, he told me he felt that the medication was dulling his senses and that he wanted to become more spiritually attuned. And he was meditating quite a bit. And so he started to take himself off some of the meds that he desperately needed. So this takes me back to, if you've listened to me before, I'm a big believer in medication when one needs it. Some of us are chemically imbalanced, and we may need the help of meds to bring us to an even neutral place. And that, not only is it okay, it's our responsibility, and it's necessary and good. And so unfortunately, that is something that in my family, we learned the hard way. So anyways, so John bringing through all of this, and my dad and my grandmother and my guides coming forward, trying to remind all of us that, suicide is something that is personal to each soul's journey. And what I want to go into now is my broader understanding of our soul's journeys and our soul's plan. So before we're born, we set up a loose blueprint or script for our life based on the karmic lessons or the biggest challenges that our soul needs to learn for our own soul's growth and evolution. And so in this pre-birth plan, some of us, the question I get a lot is suicide planned pre-birth? And some of us, it is a possibility. It's never a certainty, okay? But from my understanding, it is a strong possibility or probability. And that soul, meaning if that is part of your contract, you are bringing in unhealed energies from past lives back into the physical body with the intention of healing them. And the hope is that one will be able to accomplish that, of course. But easier said than done, And, if you're in your life and you get to that crossroads where you are being faced to deal with this tremendous lesson and dealing with depression and, any mental imbalance, if you're struggling along the way, that's where the hope is, that you remember that you are not alone. You have a team in spirit to call on for help, and you have living, what I call your ground crew, living people, both, family, friends, and professionals. And the hope is that you remember to reach out to those resources so that you can bypass that potential or probability of an exit point by suicide. So another question I get a lot: when do higher beings, angels, spirit guides step in to prevent the suicide? So it's my experience in hearing from so many spirits who have crossed over by suicide is that if the individual has the slightest willingness or desire for help and healing, divine intervention occurs. So what that means is that every suicide that could have been prevented was prevented, okay? And I know that's a really big concept to sit with, but knowing that, it does help you to alleviate any guilt, any mind thoughts of self-blame, remorse, regret, and guilt that you might be holding on to if you have a loved one who died by suicide, feeling like maybe what if, all the what ifs. What if I would have stepped in? Could I have saved their life? What if we would have, gotten them different care? What if we wouldn't have done this that day? Would it have still happened? So you have to go back to the knowing that no one, I don't care how, you pass away, but no one dies without their own consent. But we're talking on a soul level, not a mind level. And so what I hear from these spirits all the time coming through is saying to the living survivors who are really struggling, and for good reason, they say, no one failed me. No one is to blame. It was my choice. I take full ownership and let go of the guilt and the remorse. That's a very freeing message if you can really digest it. And when you have, when you understand why you have to suffer through challenging times, okay, you then find value in going through it. And that's all part of this earth school. And so when we pass away, we're able to lift the veil and see more clearly. And so we can appreciate the challenges and the difficult times we came to in our lives because they were gifts. They the contrast allowed us the opportunity to do and be better and to grow our soul. So, having said all that, the greatest gift that we can give our loved ones in spirit is to let go of the resistance and the judgment that we may be holding on to. And sometimes we're not even aware we're doing that. It's unconscious. But letting go of that struggle, that resistance around how they passed, and all the details that go along with it. And then honoring it was their path, right? We all have our own path. And it was their soul's plan for this lifetime. And then if we can go on with our lives and live fully again, wholeheartedly, okay? And to really be able to show up in our lives, to find the courage and strength to keep carrying out whatever it is that our soul lessons are and to follow our soul's plan, while at the same time carrying their legacy with us, right? Keeping their memory alive and knowing that they very much are with us energetically. That is their greatest wish. I hear it all the time. And so what we can also do for them is lift them up in prayer. Pray for your loved one's highest truth and highest healing, as well as your own, okay? And sometimes it helps to ask to see the situation through God's eyes, because that is through a place of all love. So if you or you know someone who may be struggling with depression or suicidal thoughts, I would highly encourage you reach out. Remember to reach out first and foremost through prayer, okay, and calling on all of your angels and spirit guides, what I call your team spirit, all your departed loved ones. This is exactly what I did when I was struggling 20-some years ago with a dark night of the soul. I called out for help, and I didn't know who I was calling to, but it turned out my guardian angel and my grandma babe, who died by suicide, saying, "We are here, you are not alone, and we want to save you from going down that same dark road that your grandmother went down." And it worked. That is what put me on this trajectory for my lifetime. And so I would highly encourage you to remember to pray. It starts with an intention followed by an invitation, okay? And that intention is the desire for help, to feel better, to do and be better. And then just asking, which is prayer. And then the next step would be praying and asking Spirit to bring you the right resources and people, professionals in this world. And you have to remember, Spirit needs options. So you have to let go of what you think that might look like, okay? Just put out the request, let go, and trust miracles will happen. Synchronicity will happen. And so the right people will show up at the right time, the right books or podcast or whatever it is that you need to hear that's going to help you in some way, shape, or form. And so if you set the intention and then you're willing to take that next step and receive the help that you so maybe desperately need, that's how you can, really fulfill what your soul came here to do, conquer those karmic lessons, challenges, and then be able to get back into alignment with your higher self and on that soul's path. Remember this, no one has a closer connection to your higher self, your own intuitive knowing, and your team spirit than you do, okay? So you have to trust that and know that you are never, never alone. As always, I am wishing you blessings and all love.